Free from fins. Chapter 6. Princess Nicolette was enthralled when it came to the kingdom of Derwin. It was so much more exciting than her kingdom. In Amishi she had to do everything perfectly, which wasn't a problem for her since all she had to do was act like a lady. Basically, she had to sit there and look pretty. Of course, she also had to learn how to play the piano, stitch properly, and keep her voice down, but she transcended all of these things. In Derwin though, she had completely changed herself. Instead of the proper princess that she was, she made herself into one of her servants. She still wore a clean white dress, but it was less fancy than what she should have been wearing. Nicolette walked around the kingdom one last time as a maid. Today she would have to revert back to her normal way of life when she went to the castle. She would be meeting her future husband after all. The truth was that she already met him in a way. Nicolette happened to be the girl who found him on the beach when Bree saved him. She wasn't disappointed when it came to her arranged marriage. He was by far the most handsome prince. She could live with him without a problem. Nicolette was always taught that marrying for love was never an option. As the perfect princess, she never disagreed. Walking along the marketplace with her maids, Nicolette took in what was going to be her new home. She loved it so much. She was grateful that she went early to check the kingdom out as a simple person. Unfortunately, as she passed two women gossiping, she heard the most unsettling rumor. She almost wanted to take back what she said about Derwin being an exhilarating place. "I heard that snob of a princess is coming tonight," one woman said in a hushed voice. The other woman nodded. "I hope she doesn't taint our prince into thinking we need to change. I'd hate to become those imperfectly perfect cheaps." Yes, we all know our king feels we should change. It's such a shame that Avani doesn't have a princess over the age of 12 or any kingdom at that. It would be a much better deal than uniting with Amishi. Why does the king let Amishi control him anyway? Since when did they come to be so important? All of the kingdoms get along just fine, save Effa and Amishi. I heard it's because our king is getting scared of the waters. He'll take whatever order they ask him to fulfill as long as they help keep sirens away. Did you hear about the prince and princess' latest objective? No, pray do tell. The women looked around. Nicolette hid her face and pretended to be looking at some of the apples in front of her. Then she leaned in closer to hear more from the two women. "They are trying to prove the sirens are innocent." The other woman gasped, "Really?" "Yes. Now it's not like I want a war, but it's probably the most scandalous thing I've yet to hear. How could they possibly believe that those sirens are innocent? They have killed many men at sea. Thankfully, the king won't allow the prince to gain the throne if he doesn't drop the issue." Nicolette turned away, feeling she had heard enough from the two women. If anything, they both needed to work on whispering. Nicolette was thankful for seeing she wasn't wrong in roaming the kingdom as a maid. Otherwise, dressed as a princess, she would have been ridiculed behind her back. A thought popped into her mind as she walked alongside her maids, who seemed to be watching everything around them with distaste. She decided that she would continue to keep up her act as a maid when they went into the castle walls. She wanted to hear all of what was going on. In order to do that though, she'd have to dress one of her maids as herself. When the time came to prepare to enter the castle, she pulled her most trusted maid aside and said, "I want to hear what they think of me. Will you go in my place as my double? I'm concerned about what the prince and others picture me as." "I know you can do it since you've been my double before." The maid bowed. "Of course, I will. Anything for you, my lady." "Thank you, Janice. Don't let any of the other maids know we switched, especially my mother's handmaiden." Janice bowed again as they went into the inn they had been staying at. Nicolette sent the other maids to fetch some food for them. Janice then fitted herself into one of Nicolette's graceful dresses covered in white pearls. Nicolette changed into another outfit the maids wore. It was a white dress yet again, but it had a hood that covered her eyes. It was a way to remind servants to always look down instead of meeting the gaze of royalty. Once the switch was done and the other attendants hadn't come back yet, Nicolette decided it was best to go looking for them. She informed Janice she'd be back, addressing her as the princess. They both knew the procedure when Janice acted as her decoy. The maid would never address Nicolette as the princess, and Nicolette would never address her as Janice. Nicolette went out of the room and walked down the hall, bumping into a strange woman with dark violet hair. The woman looked at her, sensing something was off. Keeping her cover, Nicolette said with a simple bow, "Excuse me, my lady. I didn't mean to run into you." Before the woman could say anything, Nicolette took off around the corner to continue her search for her attendants. She didn't even think about why the woman was heading toward where she was staying. Elsa, who was the purple-haired woman, chuckled as she watched Nicolette walk away. However, the princess wasn't the only one missing an important detail. Elsa didn't think that Nicolette would have a decoy, as Elsa had stopped watching the princess's movements. She did know Nicolette dressed as a maid beforehand, but she hadn't seen Nicolette's plan of staying a maid. Entering the room, Janice asked in a declaring voice of a princess, "What are you doing in here?" "I have no need of cleaning." Elsa produced a ball of circling water in her hands. She swirled it around and came closer to the dressed-up maid. Janice backed up with a look of shock as she mumbled out the word, "Witchcraft." Laughing, Elsa added with her voice ringing with strength, "That's not all I am, Your Highness." Janice noted the power in Elsa's voice. "A siren?" "Bravo!" Elsa said as she took a bottle of poison and dripped 2 drops into the water still spinning above her hand. The water turned a deep purple once the poison was mixed in. Elsa then thrust the water at Janice with full force. Janice tried to shriek for help, but the poison was fast, shutting her down before she could. Elsa clicked her tongue as she kneeled down by the lifeless maid, plucking a light brown hair from the girl. Elsa put the hair inside the potion she had brought with her. Then she took the string of pearls around the maid's neck and poured the potion over it. The necklace glowed for a moment, then it died down to normal. Elsa put it on, and her face shifted to Janice's. All that was left was to change into the rest of the clothes and dispose of the body. A wicked smile flicked on Elsa's face. When the real Nicolette and the rest of the maids came back up, Elsa had taken care of everything. She wore the white pearl-covered dress as she appeared to be the princess to the other maids, and to Nicolette, her trusted attendant. Nicolette bowed low to Elsa, suspecting nothing was the matter as she kept her act of a maid, looking anywhere but to Elsa's eyes. "I found them, Your Highness. Apparently, your food will have to wait, however. The king is holding a dance in your honor, along with a feast." "Very well, take me to the carriage," Elsa said. The maids stood from their bow along with Nicolette. They circled Elsa as a form of protection as they led her outside where the carriage waited. The footman helped Elsa into the carriage and then assisted Nicolette next. Elsa wasn't expecting this, but she held her surprise. She didn't know that the princess allowed maids to ride with her, but Nicolette most certainly did when she needed a decoy, and she always had someone with her no matter the journey. Nicolette finally looked over at Elsa, who caught her staring. Normally Nicolette wouldn't have looked back down when they were alone in the carriage, but she knew something was wrong. She was certain the girl wasn't Janice. Nicolette decided not to speak to Elsa, afraid to mention anything about keeping their cover. If she mentioned anything about it, Elsa would catch on to her mistake. It wasn't long before they reached the castle. The footman opened the door and got Elsa out first, then Nicolette. The other maids got down from the front seat with the driver. The carriage sped off after they were all out. Awaiting them at the doors were Daniel, Minta, Topsy, the king, and Bree, who stood far off to the side. Elsa took the lead, her dress flowing out behind her as she stepped. Nicolette walked to her side, peeking glances at Elsa to figure out what could possibly be going on with Janice that made her seem so foreign. When Elsa reached the group, she, Nicolette, and the maids bowed. Daniel, Topsy, Minta, and the king showed the same respect to Elsa. The king stepped forward and took Elsa's hand, smiling, "I'm glad you made it, Princess Nicolette." He kissed the top of Elsa's hand and she bowed her head. "Thank you for inviting me, King Philip." Her eyes then flickered to Bree. Bree met her eyes, feeling the same suspicion as the real Nicolette did. Something was terribly off, but she couldn't pin it down. Nicolette noticed Bree's reaction and noted that she would have to speak to her. She, however, felt something strange about Bree as well. It mainly came from her blue hair, a blue that reminded her of a mermaid tale she had seen. The king brought Daniel forward, not noticing the looks being passed around. "This is my son, Prince Daniel. I'm sure you'll be a wonderful match for one another." Nicolette watched as Bree sunk herself lower than before. It was clear this odd girl had feelings she shouldn't have towards Daniel. This made her more trustworthy in Nicolette's eyes for whatever reason, at least more trusting than Elsa. Nicolette didn't care if Bree might be a mermaid, she had to find out what was going on. Daniel took Elsa's hand, bowing as he kissed it. "Princess Nicolette, I've heard much about you." Elsa faked a blush, "And you, Prince Daniel." Daniel smiled and turned to his sister and grandmother. "This is Topsy, my sister. And my grandmother, Minta." Then he faced Bree, using his head to nod her over. He placed his hand on Bree's back as he said, "And this is our guest, Bree. She doesn't speak, but she's full of energy, beauty, and—" The king caught his son's eye before Daniel could continue. "She'll be leaving very soon once we have the time," the king said. "Come, we have prepared a feast and dance for you." Together they all went inside. Daniel led Elsa in, out of respect for his father's wishes. Bree lagged behind, which gave Nicolette a good moment to ask something of Bree when everyone else was ahead of them. Nicolette whispered to Bree, "There's something off about my lady, you must help me solve it. If you hear anything, tell me." Bree turned to look at Nicolette. She wanted to say something, but she bit her tongue. It was frustrating not being able to speak. Bree was curious about the princess's behavior as well and also wanted to know why Nicolette was asking for her help. Finally, Nicolette decided she would explain things further, but she knew they certainly couldn't do it there. "Find me at the ball. I'll explain everything I know in exchange for your help." Bree pursed her lips and then nodded. Nicolette smiled thankfully and quickened her pace to fall in line with the other maids behind Elsa. Topsy looked back at Bree and walked more slowly so Bree could catch up. Once they were walking side by side with Minta, Topsy took Bree's hand. Bree looked down at the princess and smiled, telling her everything was all right. She hoped she wasn't lying. Minta glanced over at Elsa, then back to Bree. Minta had seen the cold stare between the two when they met at the castle doors. Bree gave her a look saying she had no clue but would explain later. Later, meaning after Bree talked to Nicolette. The doors to the ballroom opened. All music that was playing had ceased as they walked in. Bree, Nicolette, and the other maids fell back behind the royals with their heads down. The people bowed, and then the king started the music again as he took his seat and had Daniel and Elsa take the dance floor. Nicolette didn't wait any longer before pulling Bree away from the room. Unfortunately for Nicolette, she pulled along Topaz and Minta too since Topsy held Bree's hand and Minta's as well. Realizing she couldn't take them back, Nicolette stuck to her plan, leading them into a quiet, spacious room. "Why have you taken us here?" Minta demanded from Nicolette. Bree stopped her. Nicolette pressed forward. "It's the princess. I don't think she's who she says she is." Minta gave an expectant look to Nicolette. "And how would you know?" Nicolette sighed and took her hood off, standing straighter while her blue eyes dazzled. "Because I'm the princess. I assigned one of my maids to be a decoy because I heard some awful rumors about me, but she doesn't seem like herself. Who is it then? Bree asked willingly as she saw Nicolette was the girl that found Daniel on the beach. Everyone gave her a look of shock for speaking. You can speak, Nicolette said, then you must be who I think you are, or at least what you are. Your voice gives it all away. You're a mermaid. The one I saw swimming away when I found Daniel on the beach. Bree nodded then sadly added, my voice is diminishing though. Please tell us what you remember about what happened with your maid. The last time I remember her acting normal was when I left to find the other maids. Did anyone pass you as you left? Minta asked. Nicolette thought about it, then her mind rang the bell. Yes, I bumped into a woman. She was very odd. She had hair like, Nicolette looked up at Bree with wide eyes, like yours, but violet. Now it was Bree's turn to go wide-eyed, only she collapsed to the floor. Topsy instantly helped Bree back to her feet as best she could. They all asked what the matter was. With deep fear in her eyes, Bree said, it's Elsa. She's the one with who I traded my voice and soul for legs. She's a powerful witch who knows the ways of the wizards and has the voices of many. She looked at each of them realizing how her foolish act had turned into a dangerous one. Is she going to take Daniel? Topsy asked scared as well. No, she won't get away with that. Minta said, not while I still breathe. She looked at Bree, was she the one who attacked us? Bree nodded, yes, that was her. I'm certain she is the blame for many of the attacks. She wants war. Nicolette put her hood back on, we must go back at once if he truly is in such danger. It's lucky that I decided to stay a maid, otherwise none of us would have figured it out. Yes, we'll use this to our advantage, Minta said. She turned to Bree, I will not be allowing you to do this again, but please, remain close to my grandson at all costs and use your voice if you have to. I understand, Bree said, I hope my father gets our message tonight. Topsy took Bree's hand and dragged her to the door, hurry, hurry. We have to get back in there before she brainwashes him. They took leave of the room and went back to the ballroom where the song just ended. Daniel bowed to Elsa, and she did the same to him. They all watched Daniel carefully, trying to see if he was in any way enchanted. They drew out breaths when he looked up at Bree and winked. Nicolette and Topsy then pushed Bree forward, signaling her to go dance with him. Daniel made it to Bree first before Elsa could ask for another dance. Elsa stared Bree down, not mad, but interested in how Daniel had dismissed Elsa so quickly. She used her power throughout the whole first dance. Elsa thought by now Daniel would be charmed by her spellbinding voice. Bree smiled and took his hand as the music began. She gazed into his eyes the whole time, searching them. More than before, she wanted to break everything to him. Tell him what she was, who she was, Elsa's identity, and the storm coming his way. Elsa's plan must involve turning him against Bree, so shouldn't she tell him first? Daniel saw her anxious expression. Something bothering you? What is it? Bree decided to give him a little hint. She glanced at Elsa who was dancing with a lord. Daniel followed her stare. He then turned back to Bree and cupped her face with his hand. She smiled sadly. Princess Nicolette is nothing to worry about. Her voice may be enthralling, but I'm too attracted to an adventurous and nosy girl. Those words warmed her. For one, she knew Elsa's voice had done nothing to him yet. Second, she fell deeper in love with Daniel, a feeling she had tried to suppress. She placed her head against his chest, glad the song was a slow one. He held her tighter. Then he said in her ear, remember to meet me at 1.